The Drew Carey Show premiered in 1995, entering a television landscape dominated by the like of Friends and Seinfeld, but it quickly carved out a niche of its own. It wasn't a glamorous show about beautiful people living in New York. It was a celebration of the everyman, a love letter to the often maligned city of Cleveland, and a showcase for Drew Carey's unique brand of self-deprecating humor. The public believed a very specific narrative. The show was a hit, a critical darling, and a consistent performer for ABC. It was an innovative and very likable show, remembered for its fine ensemble cast and its willingness to take risks. This was the official story for years. The show was part of a golden era for ABC comedies, and its success seemed assured. It was the kind of show that defined a network, a reliable source of laughs and viewers that the network was happy to have. The true picture, however, was far more complicated. The show's huge success created an air of invincibility. When ABC signed a long-term extension with producer Warner Brothers in 2001, locking the show into the schedule through 2004, it seemed like a savvy move, a way to secure a cornerstone of their lineup for years to come. The deal was worth nearly $80 million for the final seasons. It was a decision made in a moment of triumph. But this very contract, this ironclad agreement, would become the thing that poisoned the well. It was a golden handcuff that would soon become a noose around the network's neck. This is the first sign that things were not as they seemed. Why would a network commit so heavily to a show if they weren't fully confident in its future? The answers we'll see is that the confidence was genuine, but it was about to be shattered by a perfect storm of misfortune and perhaps even self-inflicted wounds. The triumph of 2001 was the foundation for the disaster of 2004. What happened to turn a flagship show into a pariah? At first, the cracks in the facade were small, easy to dismiss. But looking back, they are impossible to ignore. The show was a juggernaut in the late 90s, its audience peaking at over 17 million viewers. But ratings, even for a hit, can fluctuate. The first major sign of trouble came with a shift in the television landscape. The competition was getting fiercer, with shows like The West Wing hitting their stride on NBC and The Bernie Mac Show premiere on Fox. Still, a slight dip in ratings wasn't cause for alarm. The show was a beloved institution. But then, strange behavior began. The network, despite the show's consistent performance, started moving it around the schedule. As one industry observer noted, the show premiered on Wednesday nights, an evening where it has inhabited 4 separate time slots. It's also been shown regularly on Tuesdays, and Thursdays, and Fridays, and Mondays. This constant shuffling was an early warning sign. What is the most fundamental rule of television? Building an audience requires consistency. The show's home was becoming a moving target. This erratic scheduling, known in the industry as the death slot, is often a sign that a network is losing faith in a show or trying to use it as a sacrificial lamb to prop up other struggling nights. Why would a network do this to its own hit? It suggested that something wasn't adding up behind the scenes. The commitment from 2001 was there, but the network's actions suggested a growing frustration, a desire to maybe find a way out. The tipping point came in the fall of 2002. ABC, in a move that many considered baffling, decided to switch the show to Monday nights for its 8th season. This led to an even more bizarre scenario. The show was scheduled to follow Monday Night Football in some parts of the country and precede it in others. This created an impossible situation for viewers who could never be sure when the show would actually air. The network had effectively made it difficult for people to watch the show. The audience predictably collapsed. The ratings went down by more than 40% compared to the previous year. The question is, was this a horrifying miscalculation by ABC, or was it something more deliberate? Was the network trying to engineer a scenario that would give them an excuse to be free of the costly commitment? The strange behavior was just beginning. As the show's ratings tanked, the whispers in Hollywood grew louder. Insiders, former executives, and even the show's own creators began to point fingers. The public narrative was that the show was simply past its prime. But people on the inside were starting to talk about a very different story, one of corporate regret and a network trying to extricate itself from a bad deal. The network had a serious case of buyer's remorse. They had committed nearly $80 million for a show they no longer wanted. A new regime had taken over at ABC, and they had no loyalty to the Drew Carey show. It wasn't their baby. One insider, Sam Simon, the director of the final episode, was openly critical of the network's actions. You can point to a lot of things that ABC did. They did a lot of things that were dumb, and I think this was one of them. He said, adding a damning indictment of network politics. If the people who put the show on the air at ABC were still there, we'd still be on the air and we'd still be a hit. It's just an embarrassment to new regimes when other shows do better than the ones they put on the air. These were not the words of a disgruntled employee, but of a respected director who witnessed the entire debacle firsthand. The show's co-creator, Bruce Helford, added another layer to the mystery. He explained how the show's creative ambition, fueled by their earlier success, created a massive financial headache for its future. They had carte blanche early on, a special fund for us to do dance numbers or whatever. While this freedom resulted in incredible television, it left a legacy of complex music rights issues. This, Helford admitted, was a big reason why the show was so difficult to release on DVD or for syndication for years. The very ambition that made the show special was now part of the complicated legacy. But the most shocking statements came from the fans and industry watchers. They directly accused the network of something much more insidious, sabotage. It was a calculated move to lower the show's value. But could the evidence really support such a serious claim? The evidence that ABC sabotaged the Drew Carey show is compelling and difficult to dismiss. The most damning piece of evidence is the documented schedule changes. After renewing the show through 2004, ABC placed it on Monday nights, pitting it directly against the CBS comedy block, which included the massive hits Everybody Loves Raymond and The King of Queens, as well as the popular reality show Fear Factor on NBC. This was the television equivalent of throwing a lamb to the wolves. Why would a network want to destroy its own property? The motivation becomes crystal clear when you look at the economics. ABC was paying Warner Brothers approximately $3 million per episode. This fee was more than 3 times the typical cost for a half-hour sitcom. When the ratings plummeted, the show was no longer profitable. The network was now losing a significant amount of money to air a show that no one was watching. They were contractually obligated to air the episodes, but they could control when and how they aired them. As the Los Angeles Times reported in 2003, the show was in a state of limbo, airing leftovers from a season when ratings plummeted, prompting a 5-month hiatus and ABC's decision to leave the program off its fall schedule. A show with 26 new episodes on order was left off the fall schedule. How can a show build an audience if it isn't on the air? This lack of promotion was a clear sign of a network that had given up. The final act of what fans called sabotage came when the show was finally burned off. ABC burned off the rest of the 8th season and all of 26 episodes of the 9th season during the dead of the summer, according to reports from the time. They didn't just bury it, they went out of their way to ensure it failed. They aired the episodes out of order, so the show's storyline didn't make sense. This was the final nail in the coffin, a deliberate act of narrative destruction. The evidence is clear. A network had turned on its own show. But what was the moment this all came to a head? The turning point was not a single event, but a collision of forces. The 2001 deal, which was supposed to be a celebration, became the foundation for the show's ruin. As one source at the time noted, "It's not as if ABC is swimming in hits. The schedule has so many holes that there would seem to be room for Carey, particularly when ABC is paying around $3 million an episode for the show." This highlights the sheer absurdity of the situation. The network was willing to air subpar shows while shelving a proven sitcom. The consequences were devastating. The show's final season was produced in a virtual vacuum. There was no fanfare, no network support. Drew Carey, ever the good soldier, remained publicly diplomatic, saying, I don't have anything bad to say about ABC. I never will. I only try to do a good show. After that, it's out of my hands." This graciousness was perhaps the most damning indictment of all. Even the star knew the fight was over. The show, once a source of pride, had become a source of embarrassment for the network. Reactions from the cast and crew were marked by sadness and resignation. Sam Simon's frustration was palpable as he lamented the embarrassment of the new regime. "It's just an embarrassment to new regimes when other shows do better than the ones they put on the air," he said. The writing was on the wall. The people who championed the show were gone, and the new executives were openly hostile to it. The network was done with the Drew Carey Show. The final chapter was being written by people who actively wanted to see it end, and it would end in the most ignominious way possible. When you connect all the dots, a clear and shocking picture emerges. The Drew Carey Show was not simply a victim of declining ratings. It was a victim of corporate politics, financial engineering, and a network that actively worked against its own best interests. The official narrative was that the show was old and tired, but the evidence suggests ABC, under new management, was trying to get rid of an expensive remnant of a previous regime. They signed a deal to keep the show on the air, but they had no real desire to do so. The scheduling moves, the lack of promotion, the burning off of episodes out of order, these were all tactics designed to tank the show's performance and justify getting out of the contract. As one Reddit user accurately summarized, they used the terrible ratings as an excuse to put the show on hiatus. The financial greed at play is staggering. The studio, Warner Brothers, was making a profit on the licensing fee alone, ensuring that even though the show was failing, they were still cashing in. But for ABC, the $3 million per episode was hemorrhaging money. They were losing millions on a show they couldn't cancel. By ruining the show's legacy, they were able to paint its cancellation as a creative inevitability rather than a financial disaster of their own making. The theory is not just a conspiracy, it's a logical conclusion from the available facts. Fans expressed their exasperation with these shocking revelations. One pointed out another layer, that the Monday night slot was particularly problematic because it was also on before Monday Night Football and would often get preempted because of it. This meant the show wasn't just being buried, it was being actively interrupted. The entire situation reeks of a network trying to destroy a show they no longer wanted. The ultimate question remains, was this all just incompetence or was it a deliberate act of malice? The answer, and the final shocking revelation, will determine how this story is truly remembered. The real reason the Drew Carey Show was taken off the air isn't that the ratings collapsed. The ratings were driven into the ground by a network that saw the show as a financial albatross. The shocking truth is that ABC deliberately sabotaged its own show to get out of an $80 million contract they had come to regret. This wasn't a story of a show that ran out of steam. It's a story of a corporate entity choosing to destroy a piece of pop culture art to save face and balance its books. It's a story of politics and greed over creative merit. The new regime at ABC was more interested in proving the past was wrong than in nurturing a property that was once the foundation of the network's success. The evidence of scheduling at opposite hit shows, preempting it, and burning off the final episodes out of order is a textbook case of network sabotage. The implications are significant. It forces us to re-evaluate how we view television cancellations. It suggests that sometimes a show is canceled not because it failed, but because the network made a bad deal. The legacy of the Drew Carey Show is tarnished by this final act of corporate selfishness. What could have been a celebrated victory lap for a beloved sitcom became a quiet, embarrassing burial. It's a cautionary tale for any creator who thinks a contract guarantees their show's future. So, what do you think really happened? Was it just incompetence or a deliberate act? Do you believe this changes everything about how we remember the show? Let us know your thoughts below. And if new developments emerge, we'll be following every detail.